This episode is brought to you by Odd Most Pizza in Canby. Handmade awesome pizza plus craft beer, cider, and wine delivered. Call them today at 503-266-8444.
Welcome to Now Hear This Canby,
your source for news.
The threat of a possible teacher strike was avoided this week.
There's a new, irresistibly cute creature winning over fans, and its name is Scootaloo.
Sports.
It's like Lucy in the football. You want to kick a field goal, but they take it away from you.
We had to learn how to win.
Goal can't be in the last second of the game!
And interesting conversations.
Because I'm one of the strongest girls ever, and I know that for a fact.
I just really enjoy writing gossip as if I was a bear.
With an old maid daughter that make the best moonshine in the coast.
And if it would have hit me in the face, I think I would have died. I really do.
I guarantee you would have died, man. Are you kidding me?
Hey friends, and welcome to this episode of Now Hear This Canby. I am your host, James Walton. Let's read the news. Clackamas County's return to the highest and most restrictive risk level for the coronavirus will last only 1 week. Governor Kate Brown announced Tuesday, saying the brief crackdown was enough to stem the tide of a fourth wave of infections and hospitalizations. Brown said that the statewide 7-day average increase for patients hospitalized with COVID-19 has dropped below 15%, meaning Oregon no longer meets the threshold for any county to be assessed at the extreme risk tier. Let me be clear. Across the state, COVID-19 cases and hospitalizations are still high, and Oregon is not out of the woods yet, Brown said in a statement Tuesday. However, we have met the hospitalization metric established by our health experts for counties to return to high risk. Clackamas, along with 2/3 of Oregon's counties, will be in the high risk category as of Friday, May 7th, meaning indoor dining may reopen at restaurants and bars, while restrictions will loosen on gyms, theaters, and other venues as well. With our statewide hospitalizations rate stabilizing, our hospitals should have the capacity to continue treating patients with severe cases of COVID-19 and other serious medical conditions in the coming weeks, Brown said. With Oregonians continuing to do their part by getting vaccinated, the governor said that she expects that we will, quote, not return to extreme risk again for the duration of this pandemic. That's the good news. However, the indoor capacity limits in high-risk counties are still severe. For restaurants, bars, and other establishments, indoor dining capacity is 25% maximum occupancy or 50 people, whichever is smaller, and parties are limited to 6 people per table. Likewise, indoor fitness centers and entertainment venues such as theaters and museums will be at 25% occupancy or 50 people, staff included, whichever is smaller. While the news that restaurants and bars may reopen Friday was indeed welcomed by many, for Republicans in the state legislature, the episode illustrated the need for bills they have introduced that would reform and limit the governor's emergency powers. Oregonians deserve stability, but the governor is giving them whiplash, Senate Minority Leader Fred Garrod said in a statement. Local business owners and workers cannot even plan their lives a week in advance. No one person should have all this power over the everyday lives of Oregonians. This reversal further highlights the need for the legislature to hold the governor accountable and pass legislation to check her abuses of power. These Republican-backed measures include Senate Bill 533, which would prohibit the governor from taking actions that keep Oregonians from working or operating their businesses, and Senate Bill 789, which would require her to get lawmakers' approval to extend an emergency declaration after 60 days. So far, both have gone nowhere in the Democrat-controlled legislature. The Canby City Council on Wednesday considered a resolution by Mayor Brian Hodson calling on the governor to end pandemic-related business closures and other restrictions. The resolution claims Governor Kate Brown overstepped her authority in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, invoking her emergency powers in ways critics claim violate the Oregon and U.S. constitutions, as well as state law. The people of the city of Canby desire and deserve the rights, liberties, and respect afforded them by the constitutions of the state of Oregon and the United States of America, a draft version of the resolution concludes. The rights and liberties that have been temporarily removed need to be recognized and restored to the fullest extent immediately. The governor's health and safety guidelines are no longer needed, the resolution argues, saying the people and the business operators of the city of Canby have demonstrated the ability to learn and apply safety precautions and best practices regarding COVID-19, while also claiming they have disproportionately impacted certain establishments. The state arbitrarily allows full, close-quarter access to liquor stores and schools, but continues overemphasis on restricting or closing restaurants, bars, and gyms without credible statistical evidence of disease spread or prevention over the past 14 months, the resolution says. This inflicts unwarranted systemic discrimination on those 20-plus Canby establishments, many of which employ or are owned and operated by women or persons of color and economic insecurity. It also blames statewide coronavirus mandates for, quote, severe economic and other harms, including bankruptcies, exhaustion of financial resources, food and housing insecurities to businesses and individuals in the city of Canby. Reached Tuesday evening, Mayor Hodson told Now Hear This Canby that he had drafted the resolution with inspiration from the Baker City statement along with letters opposing the COVID shutdowns by the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association and the Association of Oregon Counties. I also talked with a number of business owners over the weekend who wanted us to advocate for this, Hodson explained. I wanted the resolution to be specific to Canby and how our community has been impacted by the shutdowns. The governor's quick reversal Tuesday did not seem to dampen Hodson's determination to push the resolution forward. If anything, the episode seemed to harden the opposition of Brown's critics and their belief that her approach to the pandemic needs to change. Honestly, I think it's perhaps past time for our council to stand up for our business community and especially our Main Street businesses and say we can't have any more of this open, closed, on-again, off-again yo-yo effect, Hodson said. We're seeing livelihoods get crushed, and it's got to stop. It's not unusual to see full parking areas in front of the Backstop Bar and Grill in downtown Canby, though it's typically cars occupying those spaces. This week, about a half a dozen spaces on Northwest 2nd Avenue were instead filled with tables, chairs, and hungry patrons, a city-approved workaround intended to help the Backstop stay afloat during what turned out to be a mercifully brief ban on indoor dining. The Backstop Bar and Grill reached out to the city last week asking if we were able to temporarily accommodate additional seating in the parking stalls in front of his building on Northwest 2nd Avenue. Canby Economic Development Director Jamie Stickle told the Canby Current Tuesday. The Backstop's owners and operators, Ken and Lori Aragati, asked if the city would approve expanded seating while Clackamas County is under the extreme risk category of the governor's reopening framework, which allows only takeout and outdoor seating. While a few restaurants like Wayward Sandwiches have been able to expand their outdoor seating with the use of large tents, most establishments are like Backstop, with precious few options for adding tables outdoors without putting parking spaces on the chopping block. This is a topic the city has considered some time ago, particularly with the passage of our Open Air Canby program, which allows for approved businesses to expand seating to private parking lots, Stickle said. We looked at neighboring cities and realized we could apply the public right-of-way encroachment permit to the expanded seating. At this time, only the Backstop has requested additional outdoor seating in parking stalls, and it may stay that way, with Governor Kate Brown saying Tuesday that she expects to not have to use the blunt instrument of restaurant shutdowns again through the remainder of the pandemic. But Stickle said the city will work with any businesses that express interest. The Canby City Council and the city administration have been very vocal about supporting Canby's small businesses, she said. Councilor Greg Parker said he liked the concept for downtown Canby and especially applauded the quick work by the city staff to address a small business owner's request. When I was in Paris, I was very impressed by this sort of thing, he said. Maybe we can call ourselves the Paris of the North Valley. What are some of your favorite summer memories? If you're like me, summer mostly consisted of playing video games until your mom forced you to go play outside. But, after that, making mud pies, catching lightning bugs, learning about plants, and wondering why ants march in a line. Nature-based educational programs are gaining popularity, and Nani's Village, the new preschool and daycare facility at the former Canby Utility Building on Northwest 1st Avenue, is getting in on the trend. Imagine your child spending much of their day outside, playing and learning in a less formal, more intuitive environment, one where they are encouraged to get dirty and discover new things about the world around them, said Stephanie Whitmore, owner and director of Nani's Village, whose name and guiding philosophy were inspired by her grandmother. The summer nature program runs from July 5th through August 31st, 7:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m., Monday through Thursday. Breakfast and a morning snack are included. Though Whitmore grew up in Virginia, she spent her summers at Nani's farm in Beaver Creek learning to cook and can. She was just the most wonderful person who ever lived, as far as I'm concerned, Whitmore told the Canby Current last October. She always took in kids whenever anybody needed any help. She loved the children, and I learned so much about her from the community and helping people. Those lessons will play a central role at Nani's Village, which carries the motto, "It takes a village to raise a child." The community helping each other, that's what we're all about, Whitmore says. I love Canby, and we're so glad to be able to start this model here, which we hope to create in other towns as well. For more information and photos, you can find this story on our website, canbyfirst.com. A gallery featuring local and regional artists in a wide variety of mediums is coming to downtown Canby. Owners Eric and Shelley Arndt tell Now Hear This Canby the combination art gallery and creative space will take up residence at the Graham Building on the corner of North Grant Street and Northwest 2nd Avenue, in the suite recently vacated by the Book Nook. The Arndts say the gallery will feature predominantly local and regional artists along with some up-and-coming national artists for good measure. Featured mediums will include painting, photography, glass, metal, wood, ceramic, digital, mixed media, and so much more. And the gallery's name? Art-O-Matic. Everything in our gallery is unique, original, handmade, and amazing quality at prices everyone can connect to, the Arndts said on the new Art-O-Matic Facebook page. This is a gallery for the people, and we want to help you develop your artistry, whether you've been practicing 20 years or never touched a paintbrush, regardless of age. The gallery is planned to offer classes, demonstrations, and hands-on learning, while also hosting office parties, private events, team-building exercises, and more. This is a place for everyone to discover and grow their artistry in a fun and safe learning space, the Arndts said. We look forward to serving the artistic needs of everyone in the great city of Canby, surrounding areas, and those just passing through. The Arndts tell Now Hear This Canby they will be opening the new gallery this summer, hopefully by June.
Hey Tyler, I was reading an article the other day and I saw that 53% of Americans say they value technology even more since the COVID outbreak.
Oh, yeah, I think I saw that article in Obvious News Weekly.
Okay, you don't have to be mean.
Seriously though, it is true. I know that I can't function anymore without all of my connected devices. And I heard that DirectLink saw a huge spike in internet traffic after the stay-at-home order began last year.
Yeah, it's a good thing DirectLink works hard to provide constant, reliable broadband service even during tough weather, peak use hours, and that big jump in increased demand.
Right, and we need access to a quality connection more than ever. We're working from home, the kids are still distance learning, and I've even had a few online doctor's appointments.
Yeah, not only that, but so many of our entertainment options have gone virtual. They're streaming TV shows and movies, Zoom game nights, and online gaming, so people really need reliable internet.
Wait. With all of that extra online activity going on, don't we have to worry about usage limits and high bills from using too much data?
Come on, Tyler. How many times have we been over this? DirectLink doesn't have data caps and doesn't charge extra fees for high usage. It says so right there on their website. Visit directlink.coop today to learn more. On the Canby Conversation today, we're going to be talking with Jana Schmieding, a true star on the rise who is making her mark on the entertainment industry as an actor, writer, comedian, and content creator. A Lakota Sioux native, Jana has been a longtime educator and advocate, also raising awareness around Native issues and bringing Native stories to mainstream audiences. A graduate of the University of Oregon, Jana has performed and directed improv, sketch, and solo comedy for over a decade in both New York and Los Angeles. One of her pilots brought her to the New York TV Festival as a notable writer. In addition to being passionate about Native visibility, she has also been a vocal advocate for social justice issues, namely body justice, all of which she discusses regularly in her comedy and writing. Jana hosted the acclaimed Woman of Size podcast from 2017 to 2019, where she and guests discuss the way we think and talk about our bodies. Jana can currently be seen as a female lead opposite Ed Helms on Mike Schur's new comedy series, Rutherford Falls. She also serves as a staff writer on the series, which launched on Peacock on April 22nd. The first Native comedy of its kind, the series explores themes of identity, friendship, and how we define ourselves and relate to historical narratives. Jana was heavily involved in all aspects of the show, including down to the details of beading items for the costume, props, and marketing departments. We're so delighted and honored to have Jana joining us on Now Hear This Canby today from her home in Los Angeles. Hi, Jana. Welcome.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, the real reason we're having you on today, because we don't normally host rising stars in the film and television industry, is that my understanding is you actually spent part of your time growing up here in Canby, including at Canby High School, and that even your parents were teachers in the district. Is that true?
That is true. I was born and raised. I was born in Eugene, officially, but I was raised in Canby. I went, K through 12 was all Canby.
Wow.
And yeah, both of my parents were educators in the district. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, we're going to count that for sure. We'll forget about that Eugene part. So we definitely are going to claim you on that one. No,
well, then I went to University of Oregon. So
right.
I'm a duck, ride or die duck. So
yeah. I hear you. I would love, Jana, to hear more about your time growing up here, if you can share, and especially if your experiences helped fuel your desire to go into the career that you ultimately have had to this point, as far as engaging in comedy and telling stories from unrepresented and underrepresented communities.
Absolutely, yeah. I think my experience growing up in Canby, which at the time, when I was growing up in Canby, I don't know about now, but I considered it to be sort of a small town. It was a small town environment. And we were one of a few Native families sort of in the town. And because my parents were educators and my mother is Native, my grandparents and parents raised my siblings and I to be very vocal about our identity, and they taught us to be able to express ourselves and express our identity. And because my parents were educators, they helped us to, we kind of became Indigenous advocates in Canby, and sort of went through our every year of school, from like middle school into high school. We, with the support of the Native community more widely in Oregon, we would put on cultural presentations. We had like a Native American Awareness Day at the middle school. And students would, instead of going to their regular class rotations, would go and learn about different aspects of Native culture and Native history. And we really tried to, push our own history and our own identity forward for ourselves. And I think really what it came down to is the fact that, my family felt that not only is it necessary for our safety and our well-being that we're able to, thrive in our own community where we live, but it's really important to our well-being that the community understands where we're coming from, and that the community can learn to embrace different histories and different viewpoints. And I think it was, really effective at the time. And I know that as a young person, I really valued the experience of educating my peers and educating my educators, about our own identities. And
Your peers and their parents and their
and that actually trained me to be an advocate as a young adult and then an adult. Being able to sort of understand the context in which I'm living as a Native person, growing up in a predominantly white town, it allowed me the opportunity to be able to sort of see the world from the non-white lens, and to understand sort of how we can change and allow our points of view to evolve and grow and become more inclusive as adults.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's so cool. I grew up in a small town as well, not Canby, but I know not from my own personal experiences as much, but from friends and folks, how tough it can be in a small town where you don't necessarily have a lot of people that look like you or share your experiences or your identity, especially as a teenager. So I just admire so much you getting through that and using that in those days, and as well to kind of fuel your work and your experiences now. Okay, so I have to ask you about Rutherford Falls, and I think my main question is, what is it like to be best friends with Ed Helms?
Well, I don't necessarily have the best friend spot yet. I'm pretty sure he's really close with Zach Galifianakis.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'm just believing the TV too much and it's just fiction.
Yes, but we do play besties on TV. But yeah, I do think that, being considered a colleague to Ed Helms and a peer and a friend has been an enormously joyful experience.
He seems like just a nice guy, as well as being obviously incredibly talented.
He is. He's so nice. And, in Rutherford Falls is a story sort of about this friendship that Nathan Rutherford, played by Ed Helms, and his friend Regan, played by myself. It's about how the history of Rutherford Falls, the town, is challenged. And of course, Nathan Rutherford is sort of this, current holder of this history of his family, and he's really holding on to it.
Yeah, privilege of privilege. I mean, the town was founded by his ancestors, right? I mean,
founded,
Yeah, right.
And I think, interestingly enough, I come from a town founded by General Canby, who was a notoriously
in the Indian
aggressive
Wars.
He's like a known Indian killer, and we had known that growing up our entire life, and you can understand what it might have required of us to try to challenge the history of Canby, or to remove the statue of General Canby. I don't know, you know. So that's kind of the dynamics that we're playing with in this show.
For sure.
And it's sort of about how it not only creates a ripple effect within the town, but also how it manifests in these two people's friendship, and how they sort of react to each other.
Yeah, absolutely. That is such a cool aspect of that work, and definitely something I want to hear a little bit more about. My next question kind of ties into that. It's a little bit longer, but so as a white man in my 30s, I have obviously never been a fan of or even seen a comedy series that wasn't created by Mike Schur. Just kidding. But he's known for his work as the writer, producer, and/or creator of The Office, Parks and Recreation, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, The Good Place, and now obviously Rutherford Falls. As a small-town journalist, one of my favorite all-time shows is Parks and Rec, in which I see a lot of parallels with Rutherford Falls. But it obviously goes in a very different direction in terms of its approach to Native history and relations. In Parks and Rec, there's what's often referenced as a pretty brutal history with the Native tribe that originally inhabited that area, but it's mostly just played for laughs, right? It's sort of this under the surface elephant that these, well-meaning government employees just kind of have to tiptoe around when it comes up. Mm-hmm. And in Rutherford Falls, as you talked about, Jana, it's very central, and poor Ed Helms is not able to escape that and this reckoning that he has to go through, partially through his relationship with your character and just the town's history itself. And I feel like in his on-screen experience, he sort of becomes a stand-in for maybe white and non-native viewers like myself who could benefit from understanding and unpacking some of that history. So my question for you is, was what I've kind of described, was that intentional on the part of the creators and the writers? And how did you, as a writer and actor, approach this process of sharing Native stories and experiences honestly and authentically, but in a way that you would hope would not cause non-Native viewers to sort of disengage because they don't have that reference point?
So much to say about all of that. One being that, like, yes, one thing that I really love about working for Mike Schur, and I'm sure you can see this in his work, is that he is genuinely an open-minded man, and he explores cultural issues in all of his TV shows, and he takes them seriously and he gives them credibility, and he made a decision in collaboration with the other co-creators of the show, Ed Helms and Sierra Teller Ornelas, who's Navajo. He was the one who said, if we're going to have this this central of a narrative, of a Native narrative in our show, we need to hire half of our writing room needs to be Native. And I think that that's where you see sort of the very resonant Native storyline happening, because a lot of times when what is commonplace in Hollywood is that white folks feel responsible for telling non-white stories because they're in the room and they want to be inclusive. But the reality is that if we're going to tell those stories, we need those voices in the writing process. And we had 5 Native writers, including Sierra, the showrunner, on our show. And within those, amongst those 5 Native writers, a diversity of opinion and viewpoints were present. So, and that is what kind of gives that real nuance, that feeling of oh, I know these people. And I don't know about you, but I feel like even the Native storylines, despite the fact that they are very specifically Native experiences, they're universal. They're issues that I don't think they're completely non-understandable to a white audience. I mean, we all live in this colonial paradigm. We know what our history is, and I think that it's just challenging those people who, like Nathan Rutherford, are digging their heels into the quote unquote correct history, right? This westward expansion history and the altruism that maybe happened with that. So for that reason, it's the first time I think that non-Native people are seeing their history decentered. But as Native people, we have always centered ourselves. We've always centered our history. We have been taught by our elders. We've been raised to really center ourselves and to value our history and to value where we come from. And we've been here this entire time being no, ours is the truth. Also, we have truth, we have history to discuss. And, I think it was really just the decision made by Mike, Ed, and Sierra to allow us to center ourselves in the Rutherford Falls storytelling that sort of makes this show as poignant as it is, and also as funny as it is. I think it's we are able to, for the first time, tell jokes for each other, and instead of sort of being at the butt of the joke,
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think one thing that I'm slowly learning as a white person and trying to understand, Black lives and minority folks, is that I feel like I've always it's always been an option, right, to try to understand someone else's culture or not. And minority folks don't have that option, right? You live it on your skin. It's inextricable from your identity, and you can't just sort of opt out like I feel like I've been able to for much of my life. And what you said as well, Jana, about just kind of these stories being relatable. I just want to say I feel like you and your co-stars and the writers really made that happen. Just as far as sharing, these stories in a very human way, because there is so much more that kind of ties us together besides in the day-to-day experiences that we have, besides necessarily our racial backgrounds and histories. Okay, so last question that kind of ties in as well is just, obviously, like you said, it's a very funny show. It's very fun to watch, but there are some real conversations that happen that are played very straight, not played for laughs. And I wanted to ask you, as an actor, are there times where it's like, okay, this is more Jana speaking than Regan? Does that ever happen? I mean, that you're almost just like, I could be saying these lines in my own mouth. Is it that authentic? Are you able to kind of separate that you're always in character when you're on?
I don't think that Regan is too far away from who I am. There are traits that Regan has that I definitely don't. But I think in general, I was part of the creation of the character of Regan. I mean, all of us work in the room. There's a piece of all of us in Regan, sort of, and and I think that that's kind of what makes her very relatable and makes her struggle and her her ambition and her quirks very relatable. As a performer,
her sassiness. I mean, let's be honest, right?
Yeah, she's not afraid to go there. And yeah, she is. I think as a performer, it was really fun to play within the character, and ultimately, when I got to, because I'm very used to performing comedy, I was, doing live comedy for 11 years in New York City, and then another, 4 years here in Los Angeles. And because of that, it was a really exciting opportunity to be doing sort of some more dramatic scenes with Ed Helms. I mean, doing the comedy with Ed.
Yeah.
It was amazing. It was so much fun, truly just so much fun. And I learned so much. And also Michael Grey Eyes, who's an extremely talented, just
scene stealer, almost every scene. It's amazing. Yeah.
Yes. He's an incredible force on screen. And I learned so much working with him, but it's also, I think as a comedian, the opportunity to get to do some of those more real grounded scenes that are would have a little bit of a more dramatic edge, those are really exciting and really fun to do, and a new challenge.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Jana. This has been so much fun. I hope you've enjoyed a small chance to sort of reconnect with your long ago roots.
Absolutely.
Before we let you go, do you want to shout out your Twitter, or ways that people can, any other projects you might be working on, or just ways that people can stay connected to what you're up to and learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're into podcast listening and you want to listen to a podcast about our bodies and weight stigma, you can check out Woman of Size on anywhere you listen to podcasts. And you can follow me on Twitter or Instagram at Jana Unplugged.
That was Jana Schmieding. She's the co-star and writer for Rutherford Falls, which is streaming now on Peacock TV. Check it out. It's awesome and hilarious. Thank you so much, Jana, for joining us today. Congratulations on all of your success to this point, and very best of luck to you and all the great things that lie ahead.
Thank you.
Joining us now is Donna Ellison of Ellison Team Homes, a firm serving all across the Portland metro area with 3 realtors based right here in Canby. Donna, can you tell us how Ellison Team Homes started?
I started in real estate. I grew up with my dad. He was a realtor. So I'm a second generation broker, and I grew up honestly with him on weekends. And I learned a lot, eventually working with him for several years and then going out on my own. Our family moved to Canby a couple of years ago, but we really didn't know how it was going to go. And within the first probably 3 months of being here, we literally fell head over heels in love with this place. We love the community, the spirit here. The first Christmas at Wake Park, I was literally crying because everybody was walking around saying Merry Christmas and people were drinking hot chocolate, and we got in a carriage ride with the horse, and it was just too much. You just realize it's special here. Real estate's always been my passion. It is my professional love. I enjoy the people, the relationships. So much comes out of kind of the intensity that you spend with people. You're really up in their business for a period of time, and sometimes it's a couple months, sometimes it's a couple years, sometimes it's a lifetime. I feel very blessed at this point to have people that have been with me for almost my entire career. Clients that have bought and sold maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 homes. I have one client that's bought and sold 8 homes with me. 3 generations. It's a beautiful business. It makes for a very full life.
How can people find you?
How can they not, really? We have a website, www.ellisonteamhomes.com.
Well, thank you, Donna.
Thank you for having me.
Hey friends, James again. We're going to bring this episode towards a close with another rendition of Canby Then. Canby Then is brought to you by The Book Nook, Canby's amazing local bookstore and gift shop. It's your source for new and used books, comic books, audiobooks, vintage books, and you get the idea. It's all things books. You can find them in their brand new location, super sweet, in the former Parsons building across from the backstop in downtown Canby. I've been. It's amazing. You should go too. In honor of today's interview, we thought it might be valuable on Canby Then to revisit our story about our town's namesake, General Canby. Canby, as our longtime listeners will recall, was not always called that. In fact, it was originally known as Baker Prairie, probably named after James Baker, who settled north of town in 1838, although it may have also been Micaiah Baker, a 19th century trapper about whom little else is known. The name Baker Prairie can still be found around town, such as on the Pioneer Cemetery on Knightsbridge Road, or the middle school, which was given the name in 2004 as a nod to the area's history. So where did the name Canby come from? Believe it or not, it was named after a man who never lived here, never set foot in the town, as far as anybody knows. But U.S. Army General Edward Richard Sprig Canby was well known in his day, a Union hero in the Civil War. He first commanded in combat during the Battle of Valverde, where he was badly outmaneuvered by General Henry Hopkins Sibley, but managed to avoid an outright surrender. Canby had the last laugh, though. His troops defeated Sibley and forced the Confederates to retreat after the decisive Battle of Glorieta Pass in March 1862. Sometimes called the Gettysburg of the West, the skirmish was intended to be the final blow by Confederates that ended Union control of the West. Instead, the Union's strategic victory at the base of the Rocky Mountains marked the end of the rebels' attempted invasion of California. Canby later accepted the surrenders of Generals Dick Taylor and General Edmund Kirby Smith in Mobile, Alabama. General and future President Ulysses S. Grant regarded him highly for his knowledge of Army regulations and constitutional law, even though he felt he lacked aggression, a common criticism Grant had of other Union generals, and was more an administrator than a true military leader. Grant later wrote, "There have been in the Army but very few, if any, officers who took as much interest in reading and digesting every act of Congress and every regulation for the government of the Army as he. His knowledge gained in this way made him a most valuable staff officer." In other words, he was what might be referred to today as a policy wonk, someone with a rich aptitude for technical details and strategy, but with a weakness for practical applications and dealing with people directly. This weakness would soon get him into trouble. Following the war, Canby, whose father had owned slaves, was estranged from some of his relatives who had fought for the Confederacy when he refused to grant them favors as a military governor during Reconstruction. Canby was often stationed in some of the most volatile regions of the convalescent nation, including Louisiana, Texas, Virginia, and South Carolina. His tendency to rigidly uphold law, order, and just principles, while grudgingly admired by many, often made him the bad guy in times of conflict, and he was prone to alienating one side or the other. In 1870, Canby was assigned to the Pacific Northwest, and this is where his story aligns with that of our own. As we mentioned, Canby most likely never set foot here at any time during his life. But someone who definitely did was his good friend and confidant, Ben Holliday. Blunt, gruff, and enterprising, Holliday was a speculator who had managed to get himself appointed president of the O&C Railroad that was being built through the heart of the town. Holliday had a lot of pull at that time, and though the exact details will never be known, it's generally assumed that the well-known rogue pulled the strings necessary to have the town named in honor of his dear friend. What we do know is that when the community's first plat was filed in 1870, it bore the name Canby and not Baker Prairie. You'd think the gesture would have been enough to have the guy at least visit here once or twice, but whatever. The truth was, Canby had his hands full in his new post in Oregon. He was soon embroiled in a feud involving the Modoc people, who had been forced to share a reservation in Oregon with their traditional enemies, the Klamath. When the U.S. government refused to allow the Modoc to return to their native home in Northern California, the tribe left anyway, sparking the Modoc War. The Modoc entrenched themselves in a lava bed near Tule Lake in Northern California, where the terrain offered numerous advantages to the defenders. The place became known as Captain Jack's Stronghold, named after the Modoc chief. The Modoc held the stronghold for months, their band of only 53 warriors holding off army forcers, numbering as much as 10 times that. By the time Canby arrived on the scene, the government was interested in talking peace, but in the tense environment, the Modocs got the wrong message. Captain Jack received word through his spies that the general intended to capture him and his warriors and put them to death without a trial, something Canby would never have allowed. The peace parley was set for April 11, 1873. General Canby agreed, though he had been warned that the Modoc were volatile and he would be in danger. He reportedly said, "I believe you are right, but it would not be very well for the general in command to be afraid to go where the peace commissioners would venture." For their part, the Modoc were plotting to kill Canby and the rest of his party under the belief that peace was not possible. They were determined to, quote, "fight until we die." Captain Jack himself was reluctant to agree to the ambush, believing it to be cowards' work. He wanted to give the general one last chance to give them a home in their own country. Surely having no idea of what was at stake, General Canby refused on the grounds that he did not have the authority to grant such a request. It was then that the Modoc attacked. Canby was killed by Captain Jack and one of his lieutenants. Named Ellen's man, he was shot twice in the head and his throat was cut. Canby was the only general to be killed during the American Indian Wars. In the aftermath, a reinforced contingent of over 600 Army soldiers stormed Captain Jack's stronghold and forced a splintered retreat. Captain Jack and 3 of his lieutenants were captured in June. They were convicted of war crimes for the murder of General Canby and Reverend Eleazar Thomas at the Peace Commission meeting and were hanged on October 3, 1873 at Fort Klamath. The remaining 150-some Modocs were rounded up and shipped to Indian Territory in Oklahoma, where they were held as prisoners of war for over 30 years. A ragged handful eventually returned to Oregon, where they joined the Klamath Reservation. In 2019, the Oregon legislature passed a Republican-sponsored resolution to commemorate the Modoc War, honor the bravery and sacrifice of those on both sides, and express regret for the tribe's expulsion. And that'll do it for this episode of Canby Then. As always, thank you for listening. Have a great day.
Tyler, did you know that the Australian lyrebird can mimic any sound that it hears, even chainsaws?
No, that's super interesting.
Did you know that a baby puffin is called a puffling? Or that baby sea otters can't swim, so their moms wrap them up in pieces of kelp until they learn how to paddle?
Wait, Do you know any trivia that isn't like animal related?
Not really, but here's some stuff you may not know about the Wild Hare Saloon, where Canby goes to eat and have fun.
Okay.
The Wild Hare is one of Canby's longest running locally owned restaurants. Owners Joan and Darren Moden have been in business for 16 years.
That's cool.
Yeah, heck, you were just a baby back then.
Wait, what?
And they love to give back. They've been members of the Canby Chamber for that long, and they donate over $20,000 to local sports, FFA programs, and civic organizations each year.
Wow, I'm legitimately caught off. That's cool.
Yeah, they also support more than 30 jobs in the community through their award-winning staff, some of them as young as 18. Hey, that's older than you are.
Dude, I'm 10 months younger than you.
With the days getting longer and the weather getting warmer, the Canby Wild Hare's expansive outdoor patio is the place to be. Furry friends welcome.
Well, that sounds great. I'm going to go check them out just off of Highway 99E next to the Space Age in Canby at 1656 Beaver Creek Road in Oregon City, or on their website at thewildharesaloon.net. Now Hear This Canby is produced by me, Tyler Clausen. Our content director and star reporter is Tyler Frankie. And of course, our show is edited by Cameron Clausen. We also feature the vocal talents of Joy Struby and James Walden, so a round of applause to them. The song that you're hearing right now is Canby by singer-songwriter Olivia Harms, used with her permission. To find more work from her, you can visit her website olivia13.com.
Now Hear This Canby is dedicated to preserving independent local journalism and redefining local news with our fun, fresh, and energetic brand of storytelling. Our sincere thanks to our local sponsors who make this show possible. Please show your appreciation by supporting the small businesses who support us.
The production of Now Hear This Studios, Canby's locally owned full-service audio, video, and media production company. Our mission is to produce the best content in the universe, and we'd love to help you do it. Find us online at nhtstudios.com.
I will take a motion to adjourn.
I just moved it.
I didn't even ask for it, though.